And when you come to the podium, please remember to give me your name and address before you begin your testimony. First, staff will introduce the application. Then we will hear from the applicant. After the applicant's testimony, we will then get into the public comment sheets. We will hear from those who are in favor, those who are neutral, and then those who are opposed. The public not speaking will be read into the record. After we've taken care of everybody who's in present attendance, we will also see if there's anyone on Zoom who wishes to add their testimony. We will then give the applicant and/or their representative an opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony stated into the record from the public before we close the public hearing. After that point, we will hear no more testimony. The time limits are 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 5 minutes for public testimony each, 3 minutes for public testimony each, and 15 minutes for the applicant rebuttal. I would ask that you direct all of your testimony to me and not to the audience. Are there any questions regarding this evening's proceedings? Okay, looks like we can begin. Our first case this evening is case ZON 24-0007.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a request, as you stated, case number ZON 24-0007 by Brent Otteson and Constance Brand for a zone change of a 27-acre parcel of land from split zoned of agricultural and rural to commercial. The subject property is located in the southwest quadrant of Kootenai County, more specifically at the intersection of Elder Road and Highway 95. A majority of the property is located to the east of Highway 95, while a small portion of the property is located on the southwest corner of the intersection of the two roads. This is a Google 3D overlay facing north. There is significant amount of terrain. There's some vegetation on the north end of the property as well as on the south end of the property. It's somewhat hilly and would present some challenges with grading the property and preparing it for a more intense use than what it is currently zoned for. The larger portion of the property that is on the east side of Highway 95 is zoned rural, whereas the western portion is zoned agriculture. The comp plan designation is country, and the subject property is located within the geographical boundaries of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. In 2024, the Board of County Commissioners approved a conditional use permit case number CUP 23-0007 for a rental warehouse storage facility on this property. To date, there has been no groundwork or any visual improvements on site to improve it for the following use. Based on review of the record, we did find that there was a site disturbance permit request on the subject site, I believe last May. And in review of the comments provided by the Idaho Transportation Department, they advised the department that the applicant has disputed the construction of a turn lane, and therefore they said that they would not be supportive of their request for the zone change, and they would not be approving development until that issue is resolved with their department. These are some of the photos of the property in question. As you can see, it's pretty hilly. It does have some sparse vegetation. Otherwise, it's vacant. So during the agency comment, we solicited comments from various jurisdictional agencies to understand what implications or concerns that this request may have. And while it appears that the only one I mentioned was ITD with the access to the property and the improvements that they advocated for as part of the previous CUP approval, The one that stood out, and we knew that in advance of the meeting, which I will get into the details of in my staff analysis, would be the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And over the course of last 4 years, maybe 5 years, we have received very, very concerning letters from the tribe with the development in their geographical boundaries, specifically those that would intensify the existing rural character of the area. And in this case, they said that they were opposed and that their request would be detrimental to the character of the area, health and welfare, and economic security of the tribe. The proposal conflicts with the tribe's integrated resource management plan. Furthermore, as you have read in the analysis of the staff report, is they allude to the fact that this is far greater of an impact potentially than the conditional use permit that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners last year. So during the public comment period, we received an overwhelming amount of comments in support of this application. It took us a little while to sift through all that information, but we received a total of 202 comments on this request, 4 in opposition and 198 in support. Out of those 198 comments in support, none include explanation as to why and how they would be affected by the proposed rezone to commercial. Of those that were in opposition, all of them provided some information or clarification as to why this would be a negative impact on the existing community in the area and how it would affect the rural character. Out of the comments that were provided in support of the application, we tallied 72 individuals who resided in the Worley area, and the remaining, which in this case would be 35% of 198, the remaining ones were from various municipalities within Kootenai County, as well as Washington State and Oregon. The applicant's legal counsel provided an extensive letter, I believe was close to 10 pages long, addressing the basis for approval of the request. And while we acknowledge and respect and acknowledge and understand where they're coming from, we respectfully disagree with their position, and we find that the information they submitted is not enough to warrant the approval of the proposed zone change. So moving forward with staff analysis, this may take a little while, but I want to explain that it is pretty rare that we as a department in the preliminary stages of the application flat out say this is a bad idea. It's very rare. For the most part, because we don't know, we can't anticipate all the potential impacts that a project may cause, whether it's a rezone, variance, conditional use permit, or a subdivision. But in this case, knowing historically how this area has been developed and how the tribe feels about it, we were compelled to say that this was a bad idea. And in fact, we included the pre-application notes as an exhibit for your review to show that from the first meeting, we did not believe that this was an appropriate rezone, and I will list out the reasons why. The area's current agricultural and rural zoning may render the request susceptible to spot zoning, simply because there is no commercial zoning in the area. The closest commercial zone is about a mile to the northeast of the subject property along Highway 95. The subject area is not a commercial node. The applicant states in their application narrative that this is a commercial node, that it warrants the approval because of the established smoke shop as well as the recently approved conditional use permits, which have not been established physically on site. In staff's research, a commercial node is a concentrated area of larger scale commercial activity where it presents a number of various commercial enterprises that provide a service to the community. However, in this case, there is only one commercial use in the area. We find that it is inappropriate to use the existing commercial business to the north of Elder Road as justification for this proposed zone change, as the parcels falls under the Coeur d'Alene tribe ownership, thereby placing the county outside the county jurisdiction and limiting county authority over land use development. And we were very clear with the applicant in that regard. The previously approved CUP is not a precursor for a zone change, nor does it establish a commercial node. The approval of the CUP was based on limited scope and potential impacts and does not justify a commercial rezone with unrestricted uses. The request conflicts with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Integrated Resource Management Plan's goals and objectives, resulting in the tribe's recommendation for denial. The request conflicts with the Kootenai County Comprehensive Plan County designations, goals, and objectives. With regards to the comprehensive plan, I know typically this is something that the hearing examiner provides as a standalone analysis in addition to staff's recommendation, but we're compelled to provide additional information. While non-residential uses are permitted in the country designation, they must minimize environmental impacts and service requirements. While the board recently approved a conditional use permit with limited scope of uses, it was their determination that it would be more suitable and less impactful than permitting a broad range of commercial businesses at this location. Staff concludes that approval of the CUP serves as an appropriate mechanism that restricts development and aligns with the comprehensive plan's goals and objectives while preventing unrestricted by right uses in the commercial zone. And we find that the zone change to commercial would have potentially various negative impacts. Commercial development would potentially create greater environmental impacts through increased impervious surface, traffic, lighting, and other intensive site modifications. Commercial rezoning would alter the rural character that the country designation aims to maintain through its focus on agricultural and residential uses. And commercial uses typically require full range of services contrary to the designation's goals of promoting activities that require only limited services. And one would question, well, why did the board approve a conditional use permit then in the first place? Well, a conditional use permit on its own implies conditionally approved. It has a set of specific conditions that address impacts through mitigation measures. An unrestricted rezone to commercial, we would have very limited scope of review through a special notice permit. So I want to be very clear in that regard as well. I don't have anything else to add, but I welcome any questions if you have at this time.
I have no questions for you at the moment, Vlad. Thanks. Okay. So let's hear from the applicant, Courtney Witten. That's who I have but no.
I am not Courtney.
No, you must be Ray.
I am.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. My name is Ray Kimball. My business address is 21 South Pines, Spokane Valley. I'm a licensed civil engineer and also a licensed surveyor here in the state of Idaho. I've been doing land development engineering for the better part of I think this year marks 25 years that I've been doing this. I've got several thousand lots worth of single-family homes and other commercial developments under my belt in the last 25 years in Kootenai County and Spokane County. And I'm here tonight representing the owners of this property, Brent and Connie. Also here with me tonight is Courtney Winton of Winston Cachet, and she's going to be here to address some of the legal points. Our focus tonight is going to be on the legal criteria as it relates to this zone change, and I will direct you to our narrative as well as the legal brief for the vast majority of the record. We're going to kind of hit some of the highlights here, talk a little bit about some of the history, and what we're really looking for moving forward. So as Vlad mentioned, this is the site location. It is split by Highway 95 and is located at the intersection of Highway 95 and Elder Road. This is a view from the site. You can see the smoke shop in the background there. I would describe the site as a rolling site. It is not extraordinarily hilly, and it is set up very well for a land development, if you will. Grading wise, I've done several grading, or I've already done the grading plan for the conditional use permit for the storage on this. And it is fairly innocuous as it relates to mass grading. And it is very suitable for that type of, for any sort of commercial use with regards to grading. It is, you can see here the zoning. Of course, you know, it's split zoning. On the west, it's ag. On the east, it's rural, and we're looking for a commercial zone. So this zone change would allow for eating and drinking establishments, retail, indoor and outdoor storage, and other uses appropriate to the location. Here are some examples throughout Kootenai County. The late Great Wolf Lodge Inn, which is now a pile of rubble. We have a coffee stand. That coffee stand is located on Highway 53 west of Rathdrum. There's also a storage place also on Highway 53 west of Rathdrum. These are just one of many, many examples throughout the county of isolated places of commercial uses along highways that serve the local communities, and sometimes they even act as a regional draw. So the question is, why here, why now? So that's really the big question. If this were 20 years ago, I'd say no way. No, I wouldn't even. I would talk my client out of it long time ago. But 20 years ago, this was a very different location. 20 years ago, Highway 95 through here was being reconstructed. The Fighting Creek store was located on Fighting Creek. So 30 years ago, prior to any of the construction on Highway 95 and the widening project, there was kind of a ramshackle building on the west side of Highway 95, just south of Fighting Creek, and that was the closest location that anyone in Kootenai County could get, or north part of Kootenai County could get cheap cigarettes from the tribe. It was right on the tribal boundary. So it was a Fighting Creek store was located there. They had a couple of gas pumps, and when ITD widened Highway 95 in right around 2004, 2005, the right-of-way acquisition for that required that there be some demolition of that existing store. They rebuilt that in the next year or two after that, so probably 07, 08, right in there. And that's what you see on the lower photo in that slide, is you see the rebuilt Fighting Creek store right adjoining Fighting Creek. Now, that was in operation until about 2012, 2013. In the meantime, ITD widened Highway 95 to the south and created improvements at the Elder Road intersection, inclusive of turn lanes. And all of a sudden, that northwest corner of Elder Road and 95 became a prime location. Why is that? Because Elder Road started getting used by people coming from the south side of Spokane. See, it's important to note that Elder Road is the furthest north connection to Spokane, to the south side of Spokane, other than I-90. So anyone coming from Spokane Valley, coming off of Pines, can hit Elder Road and pop over and get cheap gas and cigarettes. And this became the prime location. And so in 2013, right in there, the tribe moved their operation and abandoned a 5-year-old building to move to this location, which is, as you can see, it's incredibly busy and quite a bit larger, and a far more popular location. It changed the character of this location. It brings regional draws, like I mentioned. It's a regional draw, bringing customers from Washington as well as off the highway. And it turned this intersection into a commercial node. Okay, and makes this the location that is now appropriate for commercial development in scale and intensity as dictated by the market. Now, what do I mean by dictated by the market? What I mean is there going to be a hotel here? No. That would be preposterous. But could it be something like a church, maybe a school, an RV or boat storage, a drive-up coffee stand, a small restaurant? There's a lot of things, small business, retail. There could be a million different things that I'm not even creative enough to think about, but somebody else who thinks that this is a great location would dream up that would be appropriate in size, scope, and just the fact that it's a rural area. If we look around Kootenai County and look at the rural areas where there's commercial zoning, the businesses by nature are small. They're small, they're unobtrusive. I think probably the only exception to that would be Silverwood. But with regards to the appropriateness and the scale, we think that the commercial zoning in this location absolutely makes sense because just the natural scale is pulled back just by the fact that it's in a rural location. So because this property is at an existing commercial node and adjacent to a convenience store to the northwest, we believe that this changed zoning and subsequent commercial development is not anticipated to negatively affect adjoining properties. It'll be consistent with the use to the northwest and would reinforce existing commercial use in this area. If the amendment is not granted, the property owner would be unable to create economic development opportunities with a property as envisioned by the Country Comprehensive Plan designation as an existing commercial node. The adjacent property and this intersection in general would appear to be commercially zoned properties to the general public. Anyone driving by is going to look at that and think, oh yeah, that's zoned commercial, even though it's tribally owned. And that makes sense. It's their right. It's their treaty right. They have the ability to develop on within their tribal boundaries on lands that they own, and that's fine. But anyone in the general public driving by would think that's a commercially zoned area, just like when they drive by the casino. They'd look over at that and they'd think that would be a commercially zoned area. So why is this? So with regards to the comprehensive plan, I'll direct you to the vast majority of our application for that. So policy 1 talks about directing commercial and industrial uses to locations where sufficient infrastructure is available. In this case, transportation infrastructure is available for commercial use. Water is available via well, and septic systems. There's plenty of room on those properties for an appropriate size septic system to handle commercial development. So determine through public procedure the future compatibility in unincorporated areas. That's what we're here doing tonight. As you can see in the file, that there are nearly 200 support people in support. Of the 72 with Worley addresses, 70 of them are in support. It speaks very highly to the community support that this application has. The comprehensive plan speaks to fostering existing rural communities and character, encouraging land use to be consistent with existing development, commercial to the north, and allowing commercial uses to serve local residents that harmonize with these communities. The idea here in the plan is to create some commercial use that serves the community. And of course, again, the commercial development in rural communities should serve local residents and harmonize with these communities. And then, of course, allowing rural property owners to get reasonable economic opportunities from the use of their land. And lastly, permit commercial development in unincorporated areas of the county where adequate public infrastructure and transportation corridors are or will be available, where such development complements the surrounding character. Staff had talked a little bit about the turn lanes and the spat with ITD. That's nothing. And I say that as the person who's been in contact with ITD. All our conversations have to do with the length of the turn lane and the width of the turn lane. And we're working through those with them. And that's not that big of a deal. As a matter of, and probably more to the point, a zone change in of itself doesn't create any traffic. It's a commercial development that actually would create the traffic, and that would spawn the appropriate permit through ITD. So we have an existing approach onto the property, and essentially the only thing that changes with regards to the change of use from the current use to any commercial use, that requires a turn lane, addition of a turn lane, a right-hand turn lane, so we can decel and get people off the highway effectively and safely. That's all we're doing with them. And it's fairly straightforward. Commercial zones, with regards to the comprehensive plan, the commercial zones need to be consistent with the secondary. So this commercial zone is consistent with a secondary purpose, land use designation of country, to promote economic activities that minimize impacts and do not require a full range of services. Examples of similar commercial uses in the rural area: Rose Lake Store, Wolf Lodge Inn, Squaw Bay Store, Valley Mart. That's just a few of them. Here are some other ones, some locations. We have the Bennett Bay Inn, Tony's Restaurant, Arrow Point. Arrow Point's got a restaurant. It's also got a marina. Harrison Dock Builders owns that little, or operates off that little point in Wolf Lodge Bay. We have Conklin Resort and Boat Storage down on the south end of the lake. We have Rose Lake Store and Restaurant on the eastern side of the county. There's also a little restaurant in Cataldo. And of course, we have the Fighting Creek Store, which is right across the street from our property. Now, is this a, so the present use of the site is vacant. It's got an approved boat storage with a conditional use permit. We have submitted a site disturbance permit for that. And again, we actually do have an approved permit from ITD. We're just arguing with them over some of the finer details, over changing that. The intersection at Elder Road and US 95 is the closest point, as I mentioned earlier, to connect to Spokane Valley, and it's the highest volume intersection for miles in either direction. ITD traffic counts provided by the ITD website say that the average daily traffic in July on Highway 95 is over 7,000 vehicles, and average daily traffic on Elder Road is over 900 vehicles. So putting us in the neighborhood of 8,000 vehicles per day going to that intersection is definitely a transportation hub. It is a location where there is adequate transportation and adequate infrastructure to support commercial development. So the site is adjacent to Highway 95, which will provide adequate transportation, as I mentioned, for the commercial volume. Electricity is available to site, communications are there. There's a water well drilled on the site, sewers available via septic system, but also in a scale that would limit the amount just by the fact that wells and septic systems limit the scale of commercial development. Just by the fact that we don't have a municipal sewer system or a water system that naturally limits the scale of commercial development available on the site. It doesn't limit, the purpose of this application is not to limit the scale or to expand the scale beyond anyone's wild imagination. The purpose of this application is to expand the variety of uses allowed, because the conditional use permits are strict and conditioned. It's important to note that there is no evidence in the record to indicate that the proposed zone change would result in demonstrably adverse impacts upon the delivery services of public services by any political subdivision. Water would be by well, with an individual water right, and no additional bus routes for schools would be expected with the zone change. It would not have a material adverse effect on the value, character, or enjoyment of the neighboring properties. While not zoned commercial, the adjacent property to the northwest is a large convenience store. It's got a giant billboard that shines at all times of the day, including all night. And any commercial properties here will synergize with the existing use. If the proposed amendment is not granted, as mentioned earlier, the owner will not be able to create the economic opportunities with the property as envisioned by the Country Comprehensive Plan designation as an existing commercial node. Property at this intersection in general would reasonably appear to be commercially zoned properties to the general public. Anyone just driving by would see that a commercial use and think that commercial development would be appropriate here. As noted above, the proposed zone change is not in conflict with comprehensive plan goals and policies and nor does the staff report identify any applicable goal or policy that conflicts with this proposal, nor did the staff presentation do that either. As outlined above, the subject property is located in an existing commercial node and is therefore suitable for the proposed zoning. Pockets of commercially zoned properties are scattered throughout the county and provide unique opportunities that would not otherwise be available to the local community. Small businesses unique to locations like this generally provide niche services to their clientele. There's adequate access, and upon any development, an appropriate approach improvements will be constructed in accordance with ITD permitting requirements. That is a requirement by ITD. We don't get to use our property unless they permit access. Power, communications, water, septic are also available, making this site suitable. Sound like a broken record here a little bit, but the proposed zoning and future development would not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare. The project will have access to public and private services and would follow all applicable development codes, while the staff report alludes that commercial development having a potential to lead to environmental harm. Other county ordinances as well as state environmental laws are in place to ensure that environmental harm is avoided. Furthermore, agricultural uses allowed in rural and agricultural zones historically have had a much higher environmental impact due to the use of chemicals and fertilizers, not to mention the impact of that livestock can have on waterways and fragile soils. With regards to traffic, the zone change, as I mentioned earlier, in and of itself does not produce any traffic. Appropriate traffic mitigation should be determined at the time of building permit application, so as to ensure that traffic congestion and hazards are avoided. This will include the construction of appropriate turn and merge lanes and any other mitigated dictated by ITD standards. In conclusion, and I'll bring the attorney up here in a second, it has overwhelming community support. 70 of the 72 Worley residents that responded did so in support of the application. And while the Coeur d'Alene Tribe's comments are noted, it's important to note that the tribe's integrated resource management plan is not a governing document for this application. And furthermore, the existing commercial development at this intersection was clearly sponsored by the tribe, thereby corroborating the conclusion that this is an appropriate location for commercial development. And here to elaborate on the appropriate findings of fact is Ms. Courtney Whitten. Why will you swap the, thank you.
Good evening, hearing examiner. I'm Courtney Whitten. And I apologize, I directed my written comments at the wrong hearing examiner. So I am going to try and be brief, but I want to touch on kind of three main issues that I've heard brought up by staff that need to be addressed. And the first is kind of focusing back on the LUPA requirements for the zone change. What are they? It is that the zone change is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. And I'm just going to skip through these. What this does not require, though, is that the zone change be exactly as it appears on the county's land use map. And so while the parcel does have the designation of country, a distinction that needs to be made is that does not dictate what the zoning then gets to be. And so case law has elaborated on this standard further, saying that the amendment needs to reflect the goals of and take into account the factors in the comprehensive plan in light of the present factual circumstances surrounding the request. And these bolded words are particularly important in this case because I'm going to skip ahead because Mr. Kimball has gone through and highlighted the ways in which this application is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Now I've messed myself up, but the condition, present factual circumstances regarding or surrounding the request. And what those are here is that we have a significant and intense commercial use that is already in existence in this location. And the county staff has desired to ignore it and disregard it because it's development that's been sanctioned and by the tribe and has occurred by tribal members on their land, which, as Mr. Kimball said, is perfectly acceptable, and nobody argues that. But what that development has done is change the built environment that exists at this intersection of 95 and Elder Road. And this is not just, this is not a small commercial use. This is 5 buildings, a billboard that is illuminated at all hours of day and night, and it is this development that has changed the nature of the area. And so in order to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, this zoning would reflect what is occurring presently. And this notion will affect all aspects of the application that I will get into. So as Mr. Kimball went through, this application not only is in accordance with the comprehensive plan, but it furthers the goals and objectives. One of those objectives is the importance of the owner's right to use and control their property and allow them to use it in as many ways as possible. And that is important because it's a stated objective of the comprehensive plan, which makes clear that this is a factor that needs to be considered. Another objective of the comprehensive plan is reflecting current land use and expected future land use, looking primarily to the concerns articulated by those who own property within an unincorporated area of Kootenai County. And we have 70 of the 72 comments of the residents with addresses of Worley have submitted statements in support of this application. So again, this application furthers this stated objective of the comp plan. Regarding economic development, placing commercial and industrial development where infrastructure exists, and Mr. Kimball touched on that extensively about why this intersection in particular is well suited for commercial development. Perhaps if it was 5 miles down another road off of 95, the conversation might be different. But because we have 2 intersecting busy roads and the existing commercial development, this site in particular is well suited. Another objective regarding commercial development, public infrastructure is in existence, similar. And going back to the designation of country for the comprehensive plan map, the designation does not dictate what the underlying zoning then is, but case law then has us look to whether the different zoning will also be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which it is. So just because we are in the country designation, that is not the end of the conversation. We continue the analysis, see if the commercial use is complementary and furthers these goals, which this application does. So Mr. Kimball also went through the Kootenai County requirements, and one of the most important one in my mind is that this rezone is justified by a change in conditions in the area, and we cannot disregard that change that has occurred, even though it's not, I mean, it's this parcel where, let me correct myself, the development has occurred over multiple parcels that are all zoned agriculture. And so just because the county has not allowed this commercial development to occur doesn't mean that we get to ignore that it's occurring. And that is a significant change in condition in the area that justifies this rezone. And I will not belabor the Kootenai County's requirements as Mr. Kimball went through them. But what I do want to touch on, as I only have a few minutes, is spot zoning. Staff has raised concerns that this would constitute spot zoning. And I want to clear up that because I have set forth in our briefing the legal definition of spot zoning under Idaho law. And again, interestingly enough, the court's analysis turns on whether the zoning would be in accordance with the comprehensive plan and whether it would be consistent with use that is already in existence and development in the area. And again, because this application reflects the use that is in existence at the intersection, that exempts it from, it makes the spot zoning okay, essentially. And that's what the case law has showed us. And I have that in my briefing for the hearing examiner. So this would not be a spot zone. And interestingly enough, as Mr. Kimball goes through his maps of where similar commercial development have occurred across the county, they're all spot zoned. They're all commercial nodes that are serving the greater community, but in areas that are appropriate and again, in accordance with the comprehensive plan. And then I will end with the issue of the Coeur d'Alene tribe's displeasure with the application. And I want to note that the tribe sanctioned and presumably allowed a significant and relatively intense commercial development to occur across several parcels that was the impetus for changing this intersection and the nature of this intersection. And as Mr. Kimball alluded, if that hadn't occurred, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to be here. But because that happened, that's changed what this intersection looks like. And it's not clear to me how the tribe can sanction that development and then on the other hand come to the county and say, but if there's more commercial development, that will have a negative impact on the tribe's health, welfare, and economic security. And there has been no evidence submitted so far of why that is, what that is, and this language it's set forth in our briefing, and the language of the detrimental effect on the health, welfare, and economic security comes from case law and is one mechanism by which the tribe can assert jurisdiction over a non-tribal member who privately owns land that's within the boundaries of the reservation. And I would like to highlight for the hearing examiner that that standard has only been met once in the United States. And it is a high bar to meet, and there's no evidence that this tribe has submitted that this application would meet that standard. And so, yep, cut me off. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is that all from the applicant? Yes, that's all the applicant cards I have. So now we'll move to those in favor. I have Harry. Thank you. Who wishes to speak?
My name is Harry Victor Vovis. I live at 17911 West Ness Road, Worley. I am exactly 1.5 miles from this proposed zone change. A little background about me. I am a very young 52 years old. I was born in Spokane, Washington, and have lived in Idaho my whole life. My parents lived in Plummer till I was about 5 years old, moved to Kootenai County, and I have lived at the present location since probably about 47 years. My mom and dad had property there, or renting property, and the owner sold that. I bought the piece next to him, and I've been on that piece for about 32, 33 years now, building my own place. Just the fine gentleman here said that he has not heard of anybody that signed this that has spoken in favor of this proposed zone change. So I am here to speak in favor of this proposed zone change. I drive by that piece of property at least 10 times a week going to work and coming home every day. It is a beautiful piece of property. But even though people might say that the Fighting Creek Smoke Shop and Store has no effect on that becoming commercial, it definitely has. There are thousands of vehicles that go in and out of that store every day. Now, I'd like to speak about that Fighting Creek store for a second, being a commercial business, and how that relates to this. I love it. Growing up, if we wanted fuel or a Snickers bar or something like that, we had to drive over into Washington to Rockford. We had to drive to Coeur d'Alene on the old highway. We had to drive to Worley on the old highway. It took forever, so we didn't go. It is so nice having a gas station right near my house, 1.5 miles away. One that I can either go in with my Toyota or have no problem getting in with a commercial vehicle and a trailer. It's awesome. If my wife decides she wants ice cream at 8 o'clock at night, I can jump in the car and run up there and get her an ice cream and head back. I love the store. I love everything about it. So a lot of us, we do not want to see all of Kootenai County commercialized, of course. We like our rural life. But we also like having some business close by so that we don't have to come all the way to Coeur d'Alene. I do not know. I think that the boat storage is a great idea on the conditional use permit. There are a lot of people that need places to store their boats. Doesn't benefit me personally. I don't have a boat and I never will. But it's nice to know that other people that have them will have a place to go. As for the other uses on this property, I do not know what the owners have in mind. But I tell you what, I'd about give my left arm to have a nice restaurant, or even a mediocre restaurant, 1.5 miles from my house. I think it's just a great spot for some small commercial businesses. Obviously, like this gentleman was saying, there'll never be any big hotels or anything like that because there's not the capability to support a large septic system. And is that my alarm?
That's your time, yeah.
Okay. Anyways, I think it's a great idea. I would love to see it. I'd love to see it improved in that corner. I think it's great. Thank you for hearing from me.
Thank you. Okay, Bonnie, you are also in favor and you don't wish to speak. Is that still true?
I wrote down a few notes.
Okay, we can change it.
My name is Bonnie Vovis, and I'm at 17911 West Ness Road in Worley. And we, like Harry said, we're just 1.5 miles away. I will say that they said a lot of what I wrote down, but I just think it's the word that came to mind is disingenuous for the tribe to be against this. I think they're protecting their own interests. And while I appreciate that, I think that it would be equitable to let everybody have those interests as well, especially when it's their own land. So I am in support. I don't have a lot more to add. I am very in support of the owners adding a restaurant or whatever they wish to do. But I think that it's great for our community, and I look forward to it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brent Ottoson, in favor, does not wish to speak. That's still. Connie Brand, in favor, does not wish to speak. Stephanie Brand, in favor, does not wish to speak. Lisa Alberta, opposed, wishes to speak.
Hi there, Lisa Alberta, 13230 West Elder Road. I'm brand new to the neighborhood, so I didn't expect to be here. This was a big surprise. I actually moved from a small county in the Sierras in California, Madera County, and we went through a similar thing in Madera County as the decades went by. The county rezoned things, and it changed the feeling of the area significantly. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually here, is because I left that to come here to a rural agricultural place that looked more like my home did 30 years ago. So when I first drove up the 95, I just wanted to share how beautiful it was. The first time I ever came to Idaho and saw Coeur d'Alene, it was just breathtaking coming up the 95. And I thought, well, this place is magical. Everybody gets to live here and see this every day, and it feels like my home did a long time ago. And I wanted to raise my children here. I have 5 kids, and I'm in the process of moving in. So this was, I knew that I think when we talk about this parcel, we can't ignore there's another parcel that's also right across the street that's 33 acres that's part of this that we're talking about tonight. And both of those together, it's a huge amount of land. It's a huge thing to ask to make both of those commercial. When I drove up there, I had no idea that it didn't feel like a commercial node to me at all. I saw it was a gas station. And so I bought property by what I thought was a gas station. It didn't look like a commercial area at all. It was completely rural and agricultural to me. So I'm really surprised to be here, like I said. I knew that there was a proposal for an RV park, and that was a conditional use, which, okay. But changing it to a commercial zoning doesn't seem like that fits. That totally changes the whole look of the area. It will be, I think it'll be really detrimental for all the neighbors. We also just found out that our well, which was put in 1998, and it's 320 feet deep, is now going dry at different times. We had no idea. So the water, I think, is also an issue for this development. I don't know, a conditional RV park would probably use water, but doing full commercial, how much water will they use? What will that do to the water table for all the neighbors? This is really serious concern I have there. But I just don't see that as being a commercial area just because there's a gas station. It's very residential, rural, and agricultural. So, like I said, I'm just surprised to be here tonight that this is even on the table. So, thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you for your testimony. Thomas Bubelek, opposed, wishes to speak.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tomas Bubilek. We just moved here, me and Lisa, and our property is right next to one of those 2 properties in question. So first I wanted to talk about the wildlife and how we love it here, and the deer and all that stuff that goes across the property all day long and everything. But actually that changed a little bit because, as mentioned before, the water problem. We never really expected to actually have this water problem, and quite honestly, talking about restaurants, talking about industrial use, talking about the businesses use a whole lot of water, and that would actually require everybody to actually drill deeper, and just concerns about how and where the water is going to come from, and how it's going to change the lives of families. I really don't want to have a house that's going to have continuous problems with water and when to actually get it. Also, one of the previous points was What's the limitation on a full industrial development? What's going to be happening? What is the limitation on what kind of a business is going to be put down? Yes, it's nice to actually say that it's not going to be this, it's not going to be that, but it just from the standpoint of restaurants and water-heavy industry, I mean, it's going to change a lot of lives. And if every single gas station is going to create a precedence for developing that area into something commercial, I mean, the whole area is going to change altogether. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for your testimony. Eek. Is it Linda Hummons? Lincoln. I apologize for having trouble reading handwriting. You're opposed and you wish to speak.
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Lincoln Hammonds. I'm 13624 West Elder Road. I am right next door to Lisa and Thomas. I hadn't met them until today. I'd met their father-in-law. I knew the previous owner, Joseph Raines, who owned the house there, and like they have stressed, Lisa and Tomas, water is a real issue. I had to call personally on Joseph's phone and ask him to shut off his water while he was running his sprinkler in his lawn because my garden could not get the water that it needed in August. It has recently changed and it is kicked back repetitively, and now it's not just September, it's August, it's July. I've been running out of water, and ironically, just this morning, I was filling 6,000-gallon tanks for water storage because water is a concern for me during the summer. I ran out of water in March. I ran out of water, my well shut off, and I had to end up kicking it back on. The water is a major concern for me. We have to share it within the group, and we have to limit all of our use as neighbors. There's 2 properties touching this proposed transition to commercial in this parcel, 2 properties that are touching it that drilled and never hit water. There's one property that is over 900 feet deep, and they got nothing, and it is a matter of 400 feet, 500 feet from my property. Only people in between me and this proposed transition to commercial property is Lisa and Tomas, and they're going to get it a lot worse, but it really affects mine before it affects theirs because they're 80 feet deeper with their well. So the water is really the big concern. 15 years ago, when I ended up buying that lot, we didn't have a big neon sign that was lit up all hours of the day. This is a new addition by the tribe, and I don't think that it is really irrelevant that they ended up approving commercial there on tribal land, and they don't want development for other commercial lots because it will affect my residential property. It will. I don't care about the reports or anything else like that. I have had to ask the previous neighbor to quit sprinkling his lawn, and I do not want an RV park. A boat storage? Sure. That's great. The conditional use? Yes, that can end up allowing them to make money off of it, to develop it for a business opportunity, but I do not want a restaurant, I don't want a school, I don't want a hotel, I don't want a RV park, I don't want the additional stuff.
Thank you. Okay, fingers aren't working. Tyrell Stevenson, opposed, wishes to speak. Oh, tribe.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Tyrell Stevenson. I'm an attorney for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and the tribe is very much opposed to this proposal for a number of reasons. First of all, it will be noted the tribe objected to the conditional use permit 2 years ago as well, for some of the same reasons, but this proposal goes even farther. As Mr. Kimball noted, I'll quote him, "There could be 1 million different uses on this property." A conditional use permit lays out a plan. states exactly what the proposed use is going to be and the parameters that it's going to follow. Going to a commercial use is merely an effort to exploit the location and go far beyond any particular uses that could be outlined. And that is exactly the intent in a zone change, is to broaden out, open the barn doors to any use that they can imagine, or transfer the property to someone else, or subdivide it into very small pieces which impact the environment, impact the water supply, impact the character of the area. I'll address the elephant in the room, which is the use across the street. When ITD widened the road, the tribal member who was operating the smoke shop at Fighting Creek saw that it was not going to be a safe access point to operate that smoke shop anymore. The tribe allowed the use to be moved, and actually to a smaller footprint than it was before. It used to be almost 7 acres. Now it's reduced to about 5 acres, and relocate. That's why there's only one gas station in that area. It was moved. This is not an effort to provide a reasonable economic opportunity for the use of the property. This is an effort to maximize commercial viability, resale, and do it without the accountability that a conditional use permit requires. That the proponent lay out what the plan is going to be so that there's a public process. This is simply an exploitation of the location. So the tribe, which represents hundreds of residents in the Worley area, is very much opposed to this. And so you'll forgive me for consolidating those hundreds of objections into one letter. But the tribe's very much opposed. I would also point out and echo the comment made earlier that this is a 70-acre development that's being planned. It's not a 5-acre development like the one that's across the street that is heavily regulated by the tribe, by the way. It is operated by a tribal member, so the activities that are conducted there are highly regulated. It is all taxed and subjected to the regulations of the tribe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well. Okay. Jessica Matheson, opposed, may wish to speak. Okay.
I'm Jessica Matheson. I live at 25029 South Highway 95 in Worley. My property adjoins Fighting Creek. I lived on Fighting Creek before it was Fighting Creek. My parents owned the store that was there previous to that. I am well aware of the animals that live there. So I was there in 1987, and that was known as Indian country at that time. We had animals, including wildlife. Not once did I ever see a wild cougar on the property. I have never seen a bear, and I've lived there since 87. In 2020, I had cougars scouting my property, and I had to bring in dogs to keep my children safe. I'm on the highway. I shouldn't have to have cougars in my property, but there is such a huge influx of people in the area that they're putting the apex predators out of their home. I've experienced low water just like Lincoln has. I'm affected by my brother's store as well with the lights, but I don't get a say in that. That store was there when I was born, whether it looked the way it does now or did 35, 40 years ago before I was born. But now that I'm an adult, I have children that will be affected by this. I've lost privacy because of that new highway. I didn't know the effects of that highway getting expanded when I signed my agreement with the state to take up my property, but people walk into my property now that, for whatever reason, I don't know. There's hitchhikers that come in. Iron Man takes up my driveway. I can't get in or out. So if there was an emergency during that time, my family's SOL because Iron Man gets the highway. So I don't want to live like that. I can't afford to move. I tried. I was going to sell my property and move, but everything around here is priced out of what I can make. So I don't, that's why I'm opposed. I'm not opposed to anybody making money. I am opposed for keeping my security, my safety, and my privacy still. I already live on the highway. That's where my family put us. That's where I can afford to stay. I don't have a choice on moving. So I guess that's really all I have to say.
Thank you.
So please don't take that part away from us.
David Vassar, opposed, does not wish to speak. Okay. Michael Hill, opposed. You. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mike Hill. I have property immediately east of the subject property on Miskin Road. And I adamantly oppose to this for the same reasons that staff recommends that we oppose this, and also the tribe. And I won't bore you with all the happy talk about beautiful, precious rural land, because we all know how beautiful that is, and I certainly love that. I lived in it all my life, and it is absolutely priceless. But I would like to point out, I heard arguments about Elder Road being a main artery from Spokane. I'd point out that it's actually a cutoff road. The main road is Highway 278 from Spokane that leads to Highway 95, where there's a big, beautiful interchange with a bridge, and there's also cheap cigarettes and gas. If there's going to be commercial property, that'd probably be an appropriate place to put it. There was others here that were opposed to it for reasons such as water. It was extremely important. There is no big aquifer under this ground. It's the water is from fractured rock, which is hard to come by. The wells have to be drilled extremely deep. Also, septic systems. The soil in that area is not suitable to septic or drain fields. It's really hard to build drain fields in that soil. They need to be mounded and special applications necessary to allow for the waste to drain away. The traffic considerations, those are important. There would be cross traffic, if this was allowed to go through with 70 acres. That's a pretty intensive operation, but I'm looking at the list of uses that would be allowed, and there are way too many for me to list right here in the amount of time I have. So another thing I'd like to point out, I'm kind of interested in the respondents that were in favor of this, because from what I understand, it was only notified or the people who are notified were within 500 feet, which was myself and my daughter. My son lives about 1,500 feet. He was not notified. We couldn't find anybody else that was notified either. There were, obviously beyond the 500 feet, which is concerning, because I'm sure all those people would be opposed to this because they bought 20 acres or more parcels in this land expecting it to remain beautiful and precious rural land. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I just had two from him. Oh. So does Michael Hill want to speak? Okay. Then that's all the slips I have. Do we have anyone on Zoom, Jonathan? No? Okay. So your opportunity for rebuttal?
Madam Hearing Examiner Ray Kimball again for the record. I want to address a couple things. First is the water situation. So there's a well on this subject property, and it was test pumped at over 20 gallons a minute. I cannot comment as to whether or not it's in the same rock strata and getting the same water as the neighbors about 1,000 feet away or so, 500, 600, 700 feet away, whatever it is. I don't know that. But what I do know is that there is adequate water on site. What I also know is that agricultural uses can have a huge impact on water, and an agricultural user decide to irrigate, that would have as much, if not, or it would have more. I'm an engineer for a water district, and I know that our peak water usage at any point in time in the year is always in the summer, and it's by a factor of probably 15 or 20. So irrigation is a big deal. With regards to the difficulty of getting drain fields, I've been designing drain fields my entire career. I am very familiar with the soil types that are out there, and that it does take for any significant loading, it takes a significant amount of land in order to get a drain field. That's one of the reasons why a large parcel is appropriate, because there's going to be if there's a commercial user that uses a significant amount of water that needs a significant drain field, then they're going to need enough land in order to distribute that appropriately and safely and in accordance with IDEQ and Panhandle Health District regulations. And also the large size of the site allows for large buffers, and that's probably a really important thing to remember. Any effective commercial use is going to be highway side. And what we're kind of all thinking about here is that, even though the vast majority of the site is on the east side, there's that little tiny corner on the west side, and that would be absolutely perfect for a little coffee stand. We'll drive up coffee stand. And as we talk about the conditional use permits and what's allowed under the existing conditional use permits, they're incredibly strictly regulated. It's, the one on this particular parcel I'll talk about is for 4 buildings, and 4 buildings only. It's for indoor and outdoor storage only. If someone comes to them and says, hey, what if a contractor says, hey, what if I run my business, I want to run my contracting business out of one of your barns, can I do that? The answer is no, you can't. It doesn't meet the requirements of our conditional use permit. That's what we're talking about here is to give flexibility to the owners in order to meet the local demand, which is very niche. And I'll turn it over to our attorney here, Ms. Witten, to hit some of the other points as well. Thank you.
I think what I'd like to emphasize for the hearing examiner is that this is not a application regarding development. This is a rezone. And any development that is going to occur in the future that's enabled by this rezone will be subject to its own set of standards, setbacks, buffering, all of those sorts of things. But, and water and septic was also brought up. And any of that permitting and those applications will be guided by what kind of septic is available. Maybe, if, for example, if it wasn't, then the kind of commercial development that would be achievable would be significantly lessened, and it's not going to look the same. So same goes for water. If it turns out that there isn't enough water then to support a restaurant, then a restaurant won't go in. And so the development that will be enabled by this application will be addressed down the road. This is just a rezone of the use that can be permitted there in the future. So I want to address that and clarify that, and that this is not an application for development. This is not an same goes for an application for subdivision of the land. That will go through its own application process. All of these, many similar concerns would be addressed. And this is not the okay to just go ahead and develop however or whatever you want. So I think those are primarily the issues that I would like to address, unless the hearing examiner has any questions.
I do.
Yes.
I know neither of you were part of the original application that I saw a year ago for this conditional use permit. That was Rand Wickman. And I remember a very impassioned plea at that time by the applicant for this boat storage facility. Mm-hmm. And so what's changed in a year?
Yes, I'll let Mr. Kimball. He's been involved longer than I have.
Ray Kimball again for the record. really nothing has changed. They still plan on doing the boat storage. What the plan is to do the boat storage. But if that doesn't work, have flexibility in order to pivot, switch gears, adjust, continue to use their property to its highest and best use. And so to answer your question, really nothing has changed. They just want some flexibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from staff?
It's up to you.
If you,
David Callahan, Community Development Director. Just because I've been at this for 44 years, I can't help but mention that spot zoning has a 70-plus year analysis by the courts. It traditionally in Idaho and everywhere else around the country falls into a singling out for a special privileged treatment of a parcel of land. That singling out is not in the public interest, but only for the benefit of the landowner. That's what the Idaho Supreme Court has found. And that it's not in actual accordance with the comprehensive plan. So I frankly think this may or may not be spot zoning. We don't really know until it goes to court.
well, that also, I had questions as well about some of the examples you had reflected about other places where there had been spot zoning in the county. Seems to me a number of those sites were commercial sites long before we had our zoning code.
And by definition, that would not be spot zoning.
Correct, yeah. And I also wondered about some of your other sites, whether they were actually zoned commercial or whether they were under a conditional use permit for what they had. So, you,
Can I address? I don't have. Courtney Winton again for the applicant. I don't have a direct answer to your question, but I think what is distinguishable about this circumstance is that the commercial use would not be standing alone. There's commercial use that is already in existence directly adjacent to the parcel. So this is not a standalone commercial use that would be allowed. It's already there. And so whether it's, so that is what takes it out of the spot zoning, is that it's not on its own. There is adjacent commercial use happening already, and we cannot ignore that. Do you have any other questions for me?
I
Thank
don't.
you.
Thank you. All right. If staff has nothing further to add, that concludes our hearing this evening on case number ZON 24-0007. And we will move on to case number ZON 24-0008.
I'm having some technical issues, just a minute.
Okay.
Once again, for the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. I'm going to try to be very brief with regards to the next request, and I'm not going to bore you or the public with the details because it's pretty much the same request on the adjoining parcel to the west that is owned by the same applicants. However, in this case, there are a few minor distinctions that I want to point out. This parcel is slightly larger. It's 33.76 acres in size, so it's approximately 6, maybe 7 acres larger than the parcel that we just finished having a hearing on. And it is zoned agriculture. Just an oversight, it does have very similar terrain. I believe there is some improvements on the property. There is an access road on site. I think there is a shed, and maybe in review of the record from the conditional use permit that was approved on this site for a commercial resort as well as an RV park. I think there may be a modular that is not set. I don't have the details on it. I don't think it's relevant to the matter at hand, but I just wanted to point out there's some slight differences. It also has frontage with Highway 95, but the primary access will be off of Elder Road. So those are some minor differences with regards to the type of conditional use that was permitted recently, as well as access location. Pretty much everything else is the same. One of the things that you asked at the end of the hearing for the previous request is whether staff had any additional information to add, and I didn't know if it was appropriate or not, but maybe it is appropriate right now to maybe provide some clarification. It's not a rebuttal by any means, but it's just clarification of staff's position. In listening to the applicant's engineer and their legal counsel's presentation, I thought they made a lot of good points, and I realized maybe perhaps staff missed the boat somewhere on our recommendation. But in reading through our analysis, as well as what the applicant's representative has stated, I think the takeaway in this case is the fact that there's a distinction between the proposed zone change and the conditional use permit that was approved. And it's the key takeaway is restricted and unrestricted use. Yes, the comprehensive plan country designation does allow non-residential commercial uses that are restricted in nature to minimize the amount of impacts. And that is what was approved. I think it's also important to understand that if the applicant submitted an application for a zone change prior to a commercial, prior to a conditional use permit, and they laid out those arguments and they were denied, and they submitted a request for a conditional use after the fact, then it would have made sense to say, yes, we understand we were rezoned, we were denied a rezone for unrestricted use, and we are here before you a year later for a specific use that has specific criteria and specific limitations that all the agencies have agreed to, and it makes sense. But to go the opposite direction and request a restricted use as basis in staff's view for unrestricted use after the fact with a rezone, to us, that is not something that we can support at this time. Additionally, something that we technically could have included in the report, but we did not want to muddy up the record, is Mr. Stevenson made a point that the property, if rezoned, could be subdivided because a commercial zone does not have a minimum lot size. And the fact that we did not address that is we felt that we had enough information in the record to support our position without it. But a commercial rezone, even though there is currently an emergency ordinance with regards to the minimum lot size in the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Reservation area, which Mr. Callahan can address if needed, I think it warrants a question. Why would a commercial business that is small in nature because they would be catering to the local community require 27 or 33 acres. It's possible that they could be, that property could be divided into multiple parcels that could be self-sustainable, having their own septic and drain field, as well as well, potentially, to support a number of commercial enterprises. But that is something that is on top of what we already included in our report. So that concludes my brief presentation, but I do stand for any questions that you have.
I don't have anything for you right now, Vlad. So applicant, here we go.
Please excuse the length of my presentation, but because of the need for us to make record as a separate application, I'll be going through my entire presentation. Ray Kimball, again, for the record, 21 South Pines, Spokane Valley is my business address. I'm a civil engineer and land surveyor licensed here in the state of Idaho. And I'm here representing the owners. Also here tonight is Courtney Witten for the owners, and she's an attorney to address the legal matters. All right, so the site location is here. It is on the largely on the southwest corner of 95 and Elder Road. This is what the site looks like from Elder Road looking towards the smoke shop. The site is located on the right-hand side of the photo there. You can see it's gently rolling, and as you know, it does have a conditional use permit already approved for 19 units and an RV park. It is zoned agriculture, and the site we're requesting commercial. These are types of uses that are allowed in a commercial zone. So we're looking at eating, drinking establishments, retail, indoor, outdoor storage, other uses appropriate to the location. So specific to this location, what would be an appropriate use? An RV park? Yes, absolutely. Maybe a boat or motorhome dealership? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Storage, coffee stand, drive-up coffee stand. I'm sure every contractor in that vicinity would absolutely love to get a coffee at that location. What else? We go through quite a few of them, but as I mentioned earlier in my prior presentation, this location is appropriate now, not because, well, specifically because of the use across the street. So 20 years ago, not appropriate. If we look at the size and scope of the two properties, so the old Fighting Creek store to the north, that was abandoned and moved to this location. And you look at those two photos there, you will see a vast expansion in the size and scope of that facility. Now, the acreage may be smaller on the newer facility, but the actual use is much more expanded. It's got, instead of 1, 2, 3 pumps there are probably, I think there's 10, the other one, inclusive of a fireworks stand in the back, a big shop, a deli inside, etc. It is an expansive and very intense use, and that is the focus and the reason why we are asking for, why we believe that this is an appropriate location for a commercial use, because in fact the tribal member, with the approval of the tribe, moved their commercial use to this location, and to their credit, they were incredibly successful, and good for them. So what goods and services would be applicable? Now, when we talk about, and I kind of went to that map, and you mentioned it earlier in the other questions, but when we think about those little commercial uses that are popped up all around the county, and whether they were there in 1973 or since then and rezoned, when you think about the scale of what those really are, I think that's what we should remember, that those are the scale of businesses that are appropriate for locations like this. Those are the types of businesses that naturally happen in locations like this. And I think it's really important to remember that whether it's 30 acres or 25 acres, that the reality is that the size and scale of any sort of commercial development is going to be that's appropriate to the region and appropriate to the area. It naturally happens like that. So what are we looking at? Maybe a church, maybe a school, maybe a church school, recreation facilities. So right now they've got a 19-unit RV park, but it's conditioned only for an RV park. If they wanted to put a coffee stand in there, they'd have to go get a new conditional use permit. If they wanted to put a little retail shop in there, they'd have to change their conditional use permit. If they wanted to put a little restaurant in, they'd have to change their conditional use permit. That is essentially the reason why we're here tonight, because a 19-unit RV park is a job and it's not a very good one. But a 19-unit RV park that maybe can expand to 25 units or 30 units, that has a coffee stand and a restaurant, well, now we're talking a real business and something that someone actually can make money on and serve the general community. As a gentleman mentioned in the prior public hearing, he'd give his left arm for a restaurant 1.5 miles from his house, and he's not wrong. There's a lot of people that feel that way. So will this amendment or zone change affect any property rights and values of the neighboring properties or the character of the neighboring properties? Neighboring property to the north is already commercial. And this proposal is consistent with the use of the property across the street. So if the zone change is not granted, the property owner will be unable to create economic opportunities with their property as envisioned by the country designation in the comprehensive plan. It speaks specifically that the primary purpose of the country designation is for rural and agricultural uses, and it says the secondary purpose is to provide economic activities and commercial uses as appropriate in size and scale for the area. Now, I understand it's not a primary use or primary goal, and that makes sense. It shouldn't be the primary goal, but we shouldn't discount the fact that the secondary goal of the comprehensive plan is to provide economic opportunity in areas where it makes sense, and this is one of those places. So it does meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan. So we go through that in detail in our narrative, and I'm not going to belabor that here tonight. But we go through a lot of goals and policies in the comprehensive plan and state how we meet that. So that meets the LUBA requirements, where does the zone requirement, we have to ask the question, does the zone change meet the goals and policy of the comprehensive plan? And the answer to that is yes, it does. So it is consistent with that secondary purpose of the country land use designation. And again, these are the same locations that I mentioned before. But it's really important to look at what scale we have for all of those. If you've been to any of those places, the size and scale of those commercial developments is appropriate, and it naturally happens that way. So it's inappropriate to actually think that some giant glitzy hotel or something like that would actually show up on the site. It's absolutely inappropriate to think that because that's the exact kind of business that would fail, and nobody would invest in that, and no one would build it. And as someone who's done land development for the last 25 years, I can say that with confidence that none of my clients would ever put something of large scale in that location. They put it in a location where they're going to get customers, because their goal is to not go bankrupt. It is a high volume intersection. It's got the traffic to support commercial uses. It is a commercial hub. It is a transportation hub. And it is the furthest north, and I think the gentleman mentioned it was a cutoff road, and that's 100% right. It is the fastest way to get over to US 95, closest to to Spokane Valley, and the trips and the vehicle traffic reflect that. Of course, the site is adjacent to Elder Road. It's going to have it's got site utilities, water, sewer. My client whispered to me in between that their existing well over there test pumped at over 100 gallons a minute. It sounds like that they're in a little bit different aquifer or a fractured groundwater system than their neighbors up the hill. So we do have water of sufficient quantity to support a commercial use. As mentioned also in the prior rebuttal, natural limitations of water and sewer naturally constrict the intensity of any commercial use that could happen on the site. And there's no evidence in the record that the proposed zone change would result in demonstrably adverse impacts upon the delivery of public services of any political subdivision. And water utilities are available, and there's no issues with the schools. That is another requirement of state code under LUBA. The proposed zone change will not materially affect the value, character, and enjoyment of the neighboring properties. It is already there's already commercial there. There's already commercial uses permitted on the site in the form of the RV park. And any additional commercial uses will synergize with those existing ones. That's the whole point of this. If the proposed amendment is not granted, the owner will be unable to create economic opportunities with their property as envisioned by the comprehensive plan. And as noted above, the proposed change is not in conflict with goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. And in fact, there are many goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that support this application. So as outlined above and in our narrative, the property is located in an existing commercial node. It is suitable for the zoning. Pockets of commercially zoned property are located throughout the county of size and scale that provide unique opportunities that would not otherwise be available to benefit those local communities. Small businesses are unique to locations like this and provide niche services to their clientele. There's adequate access to Elder Road. Power, communications, water, and septic are available, making it suitable for commercial zoning. Again, staff talks a little bit about how commercial zones and commercial uses have high impact on the environment in the staff report, and that's not necessarily compared to what can and does happen in agricultural zones. It can be incredibly minimal. So we have the site disturbance ordinance, DEQ regulations that take care of all stormwater issues. And so, but those aren't available, or those are not in place when it comes to farming, agriculture, livestock, those kinds of things. They have much higher potential for environmental impact than a regulated commercial development that follows all the rules and regulations of Kootenai County Site Disturbance Ordinance, DEQ, and as well as so the Clean Water Act, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on. So it's safer to say that commercial development is under a much tighter scrutiny than any agricultural or rural development. The zone change in and of itself does not produce any traffic. Commercial uses that would follow under a building permit would. And it's important to note that that is the appropriate time to mitigate any sort of commercial use or any commercial traffic impact. And that'll be dictated by the Highway District and ITD. And it's important to note that that means that the zone change will not affect the traffic or create any traffic hazards. Support of the Worley residents, mentioned 70 to 72 residents that responded, did so in support. And of course, as mentioned in my prior presentation, the tribe's comments are noted, and the tribe's integrated resource management plan is not a governing document for this application, and that the existing commercial development at this intersection was clearly sponsored by the tribe, thereby corroborating the conclusion that this is an appropriate location for commercial development. And Ms. Witten, I will turn it over to Ms. Witten.
Thank you. Courtney Witten for the applicant, 250 Northwest Boulevard, Suite 206 in Coeur d'Alene. And while we get our PowerPoint up, I will just dive into the kind of three topics that I'm up here to present about. The first topic is the requirements under the Idaho Code under LUPA for an amendment to the zoning map, which this is. And that is that the rezone would be in accordance with the policies set forth in the adopted comprehensive plan. But this standard does not require that the zoning be as it appear on the land use maps in the comprehensive plan. So what that means is that though the parcel is in an area designated as country in the comprehensive plan map, that does not dictate exactly what the zoning must be of the parcel. And the question and the analysis centers on whether the rezone and the amendment reflects the goals of and takes into account the factors in the comprehensive plan in light of the present factual circumstances surrounding the request. And again, the present factual circumstances surrounding the request are that this parcel is adjacent to a very significant and relatively intense commercial use that is already in existence. And this existing commercial use cannot be ignored and governs and guides whether this application is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. The first objective of the comprehensive plan for Kootenai County is to recognize the fundamental importance of the owner's right to use and control their property. And again, this is a stated objective of the comp plan, and it's a policy that has to be weighed against the other objectives and policies. Second objective of the comp plan states that, and that the supporting policy is adopting zoning which reflects current land use and expected future land use. And again, the current land use and the current built environment that exists is a commercial use. And updating the zoning to reflect that furthers this objective. Another goal of the comp plan regarding economic development, regarding infrastructure, and many of the policies of the comp plan are related to existing infrastructure. And I will note that in the related previous hearing, the tribe noted that the Fighting Creek Smoke Shop had been moved to this location because of it was seen to be a safer location for traffic and the approach. And so we do have evidence that this intersection is well suited for traffic to be getting on and off Highway 95. Another objective of the comp plan regarding commercial development, regarding infrastructure and transportation. And then the second purpose of the country designation on the comp plan map is to promote economic activities that minimize environmental impacts and do not require a full range of service. And this is the a stated purpose of and goal of the comp plan, But again, this designation does not necessarily dictate the zoning of this parcel. Mr. Kimball touched on the Kootenai County requirements. And again, the most important one is that this rezone is justified by a change in conditions of the area. And the change in conditions of the area is that in 2013, a very significant and relatively intense commercial use was approved, presumably for I believe, a tribal member and then a trust that holds some of the parcels in trust for a tribal member to develop this property. And there's 5 or 6 buildings to support the use, a billboard that is illuminated, and this commercial use has changed the nature of this intersection and justifies the rezone. And Mr. Kimball touched on a lot of these topics. Again, the rezone is in accordance with the comprehensive plan and actually furthers many of the goals and policies that are set forth in there. I want to go back to the topic of spot zoning, and the zone change is not only in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which guides much of the analysis regarding whether spot zoning is valid or not, but then also it is not spot zoning because spot zoning requires that there is no like use surrounding the rezone. But as I have said many times, we do have existing commercial use that is adjacent to this parcel, and so it is not standalone. And so that fact, whether the county wants to see it or not, that fact that the commercial use is there presently takes it out of the spot zoning category. And again, we understand that the tribe does not want this rezone to occur, but the commercial development that has been permitted by the tribe to occur at this intersection adjacent to this parcel is what triggered the change in nature of the area. And to say that this additional commercial use would be what causes detriment to the health and security of the tribe, again, there still has not been any evidence put forth that would rise to the very, very, very high standard that courts require for the tribe to assert jurisdiction over the zoning using that basis. And so if there's not any evidence in the record, that certainly would not meet that very high burden that courts have only found to be met once in the United States. And I will conclude with that unless the hearing examiner has any questions for me. But this application is supported by substantial competent evidence, and denial would be clearly erroneous.
Thank you. Okay, we have Harry again in favor, wishes to speak.
Again, Harry Vobis, 17911 West Ness Road, Worley. Oh, I have a lot to say, but I guess I only have 3 minutes. So, I brought a letter in that I was going to read to you. I believe you already read it. It was for the conditional use permit in favor of the RV park. And I'm not going to reread that. I believe you've already read it. I am obviously in favor of the RV park. It's a beautiful piece of land, but you're not going to build a house on there. It's too noisy with the highway and all the traffic and the lights. Perfect for the RV park right across, perfect place for an RV park right across the street from the Fighting Creek store and smoke shop. But in addition to the other uses, potential uses, like everybody's been saying, like the attorney said, this is not an application for a specific business or anything yet. It's just a rezone. And I just, with my experience with Panhandle Health District and septic systems and various water resources and drilling my own well and helping my mother-in-law drill hers, arrange for the drillers and mom and dads and everybody else, there's so many other regulatory agencies. I don't see it just becoming, as many people are pointing out, a free-for-all and it turned into a bunch of little half-acre lots with shacks put up. This is a very nice piece of property, and there's so much regulatory agencies. I believe that anything that's going to be there will still be clean, nice, professional, and it will not take away from the aesthetics of the area. I wanted to point something out here. I grew up here. I used to drive north of Worley every single day. And you'd go on the old highway, you'd go out, and there was this beautiful piece of land off to the right. It was long, narrow fields. You're on a straight stretch, slight turn, another straight stretch, a little hill. I know the road well, the old road. There was all these fields. Beyond that was a wetland area. Beyond that was some more fields. I used to work growing up as a kid. I worked for the farmer that farmed those fields. And it was beautiful. I remember seeing elk and deer and pheasants coming home from school, even younger, riding the bus down to school, and you'd see the animals and everything there, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of land. And in some ways it still is. But now when you drive near that area, if you drive on the old road, which is still there, it just ties into Highway 95 South, now what you see is a big patch of asphalt, several acres of asphalt, and these big, beautiful buildings, well lit up. It's the casino. That's commercial. Nobody's complaining about that. It provides jobs. It provides all sorts of things. There's still wild game and animals around. They're just pushed out a little bit farther. And then there's, of course, another gas station right there and a smoke shop. And there's a sewage treatment plant right through the wetlands. I know about that too. If we can have that, why can't we have this?
Thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Lincoln? Opposed may wish to speak.
So I live 2 houses down from this proposed property. I have heard regularly this statement that the water is available and they can end up supporting commercial business. That doesn't take into account what the neighbors will be impacted by with the commercial business running off of a well. Yes, you may get 20 gallons a minute, but when I drilled my well 10 years ago or however long ago it was, I got 12 gallons a minute, and I am running out in March. Now, I don't even have a hose that can pump out 12 gallons a minute, and my well does not yield 12 gallons a minute anymore, even if that's what it was rated for when it was drilled. 20 gallons a minute, yeah, you may have enough to run a business, but that does not take into account the neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. Brent Otenson in favor, does not wish to speak. That still holds. Connie Brand in favor, does not wish to speak. Bonnie Woves in favor. We want to speak this? Okay.
Again, my name is Bonnie Vovis, 17911 West Ness Road. I live very close to this proposed zone change. And at the beginning, I wrote down that the tribe said it's not compatible with the surrounding rural character. But yet, somebody had mentioned something about it just being a gas station. It's not just a gas station. It's also, they sell propane, it's a deli. It's very, very busy. It's a tourist location. Tourists stop there all the time. And they sell fireworks twice a year for weeks on end, and they also set off fireworks for weeks on end. Ask my dog. So And I have no problem with that. We live in the country. I hear guns too. I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with people who have, their own land and they're not able to use it for any other purpose. And so I think that this is a great thing. I do support it. Like I said before, I think it's very disingenuous for the tribe to be against this, taking into account that they have such a huge, obnoxious billboard and fireworks stand and gas station, and it's one of the busiest places in the area. And like Harry said, along with the casino down the road, it's just, I think it's a great idea. Also, he brought up the fact that there could be jobs added. That would be very good for our area. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Stephanie Brand, in favor, does not wish to speak. Lisa Alberta, opposed, wishes to speak.
Hi, Lisa Alberta, 13230 West Elder Road. I'm right next door to this particular parcel, the 33-acre one. I'll just add quickly, just because there is a gas station doesn't mean that we should do commercial zoning all around that. I mean, we're increasing it, obviously, by considering this. And it will change the whole neighborhood dramatically. I don't think a lot of the neighbors were aware that this full commercial request was being made. The neighbors were only aware of the RV park and the storage. They didn't know that this was a separate issue that happened. I think that there wasn't a lot of knowledge that this was a different ask when we were talking to people. So as far as the people that are for and against, I think that the awareness wasn't there for the neighbors that this is a different request. And this is how we make Idaho, California. Thank you.
Thanks. Tomas?
Hi, good evening. Again, 13230. This property is directly in the viewpoint of our house, so the zoning and the changes will directly impact what we're looking at. And just to go back to the water issue, it's simple math. The property actually goes down, the land goes down into the creek. Lincoln has 12, maybe 13 gallons a minute. We have 50, and of course on a downstream it's going to be 100. If you have a bottle and you punch a hole in the bottom, what's going to happen? First impact is going to be on the top. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of math to figure that out. So it will impact a whole lot of people about the usage of the water and what kind of businesses they're going to be. Also, like if there will have to be changes to the RV park, which is a great idea, why not just modifying the existing conditional permit? I mean, if that's going to be the changes, I mean, why not? Full industrial will attract people to actually, and companies to actually maybe even buy the land. And then it's going to be a corporate issue and corporate money getting in with a whole bunch of lawyers and a whole bunch of power behind them. And that's basically what I just wanted to say.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Tyrell Stevenson, opposed, wishes to speak.
Hello, once again, my name is Tyrell Stevenson. I'm an attorney for the Coeur d'Alene tribe. The tribe is opposed to this proposal. I'd like to incorporate by reference the testimony that I issued in the previous case, and please refer to that. I'd like to add a couple of other things. First of all, when it comes to water, Madam Hearing Examiner might not be aware of the protracted discussions that we've had in this room over the last 5 years about zoning on the reservation, but water was a central issue to that. Folks that aren't from the area or familiar with the hydrogeology may think that there's a lot of water availability, but it truthfully is not. It's fractured basalt, intermittent clay layers, and very, very small, unpredictable aquifers that are quickly drained. We've seen the city of Worley have wells that failed. The tribe's drilled multiple wells in excess of 900 feet that produce less than 4 gallons a minute. And we've seen declining aquifer levels in a lot of those areas. That is the reason that the county commissioners approved an emergency zoning of a 10-acre minimum in the rural zone on the reservation. It was because of water availability. It's a real thing, and it's a major concern for the tribe. Clearly, water affects the health, and the welfare, and the economic security of the tribe. I'd also like to point out that the proponents claim that the owner will be unable to create economic opportunities with a massive commercial boat storage and RV development. I think that it's telling that the proponents do not want to say what it is that they want to do here that is beyond the scope of that large activity. But we know that that's not enough. We also know the commercial zone, as the staff has pointed out, does not have a minimum lot size associated with it. So we could have, adjacent to the 5-acre existing tribally regulated activity, a 70-acre parcel that has no minimum lot size, very few restrictions on the use. To quote Mr. Kimball, there could be 1 million different uses on the property. So again, the tribe would respectfully request that the application be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Matheson, opposed, may wish to speak.
Thanks for letting me talk again on this other one. Like I said before, I've lived on or next to Fighting Creek property since 1987. Long before it was Fighting Creek, it was called Indian Country, which was a smoke shop again, regulated by the tribe, by my parents. Our people are forced to survive on the reservation, so I'm very grateful that our tribe supported us in that venture and continues to. However, even with that, I'm not against anyone else making money or having opportunities. But I can say, even when I was forced to move to that property as a child, I didn't love the traffic that it brought in. In 2008 is when I moved next door off of the property. My very first night there, I was greeted by a moose in my window that scared me that I had to have my mom come and pick me up. It let me know that I am the visitor here. I don't get to just create things here. Since then, I have not added any buildings that are permanent to my property. Everything that's there was already there, or it's portable. Year after year, I see less and less moose on my property. It has been a joy to just open up the door and see a mother and her baby outside, just 10 feet away. But they're not there anymore. The most recent one that showed up was a blind one. He had one eye. He spent 2 or 3 days there, and I don't know where he went now. I see more of the moose on the highway dead than I do in my property. This is the same true for the massive elk herds that we once had that would stop traffic. They were so huge. The most recent herd that I've seen this year was maybe 5 or 6 with 3 or 4 dead on the highway. The recent clear cutting of the surrounding properties near Elder Road and Highway 95 has created a domino effect that's amplified the road noise to the point where it sounds like cars are driving up my driveway all day long. That is not something I experienced before 2020. When natural trees once softened that sound, there's nothing now. It's destroying essential wildlife habitats, stripping away the cover they used to have. It's unbalancing our entire ecosystem by forcing those cougars onto my property that I was mentioning, where I ended up having to buy large dogs, which I never had to have before. I even had to train these dogs not to go down to the highway and chase off the Iron Man people. Nobody asked me if they could take my driveway up for this, So this is why I am speaking out against adding more. A zone is the stepping stone to adding more of that. It's just the loophole to get in there. It's going to happen. Since those cougars, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. David Vassar, opposed, does not wish to speak. Is that still the case? And Michael Hall, opposed, does not wish to speak. And Mike Hill, is opposed and does not wish to speak. Okay. Rebuttal? Oh, do we have anybody on?
We do have one on Zoom, Madam Hearing Examiner, but she did indicate through chat that she did not want to testify, but now is her chance if she wants to.
Okay.
Sarah Linder.
If you do wish to testify, can you take yourself off mute and share your name and address? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Rebuttal.
Again, Ray Kimball for the record. I want to speak a little bit to the water comments. Mr. Lincoln, I don't know his last name, mentioned that he's got well issues on his property. There's no evidence that his well and the performance of his well is indicative of the water well performance on the subject property, or that they're interconnected in any way. Mr. Stevenson, while he's an attorney, he's not an expert on wells. I've been doing land development engineering for 25 years. I have hundreds of projects with wells. I am very well versed in how they were drilled, what the water quality and in the fracture zones and the strata of the aquifers throughout the basalt layers of the geologic formations in that vicinity it looked like, how they perform. And his statement with regards to wells and lack of water is supposition and conjecture. We have a well on site that has a production rate of over 100 gallons a minute. That's documented. The documentation is available on the Idaho Department of Water Resources website in the well log. And so the conjecture that there is not enough water doesn't hold up. There's no evidence to support it. With regards to one gentleman mentioning, why do we not go back for a change for every conditional use permit every time? And it's because it's a process. It is a long, laborious, difficult process that is, it's expensive. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, both from my client standpoint, from staff standpoint. And it does not allow for the flexibility that is prudent and should be allowed for a property when a property is zoned commercial. I would ask that you rely upon the reality that rural commercial development is small in scope and in nature, and that's just the reality of it. And that the impacts of commercial development in this location and the commercial zoning on this property will be of low impact. They will be concentrated towards the highway because that's what would be appropriate. And that the impact on the vicinity will be minimal and but at the same time will support my client's rights to use their property to its highest and best use. And I will reserve the rest of our rebuttal for Ms. Whitten if she so decides.
Courtney Whitten again for the applicant. The only thing I have to add is that, again, this is not an application for development. It's an application to change the zoning. And so any subsequent development that's enabled by this application will go through its own process. Any impacts by that development will be mitigated within that process and procedure. And so this approval of this rezone does not approve anything and everything. And I've heard one gentleman refer to industrial development. That's separate from commercial, and that would not be allowed in commercial use or commercial zone. And then again, as we've alluded to, commercial use can very often have less impact, environmental impact, than agriculture or residential. And so we've talked a lot about water tonight, but with regard to the impact that commercial use would have on that, it cannot be said one way or the other whether that would be more intense or less intense than what the current zoning allows for. So again, this isn't an application for development. We don't have specific plans that we're coming to ask for because it's just a rezone. And so that's not a big, scary, something that's hiding, that we're hiding. That's just the nature of the rezone process, is that it's not for a specific development. We're just asking to have the flexibility, as Mr. Kimball has said, to pivot if the development already permitted by the CUPs isn't working out. So unless the hearing examiner has any questions for me, that's all I have.
Well, once again, this was less than a year ago that the other matter came before me. And I recall from that it originally started out as a much larger RV park. And because of DEQ objections, they had to downsize it to 19 stalls instead of the 35 or 30 that they wanted to begin with. Another point that was made in their justification for a CUP was to reduce environmental impacts to wildlife and so forth by having setbacks and trees planted on the property and walking trails. They were very conscious of trying to be, good neighbors at that time. Again, what's changed?
And I don't know if Mr. Kimball.
I can.
Yes, thank you.
Ray Kimball again for the record. So the DEQ objections and the backing off from that was probably the result of bad advice by their consultant. And it just had to do with the size and scope of their septic system. Were they to do a wet RV park versus a dry RV park? The difference which is sewer hookups versus not sewer hookups in a dump station. And so that's why that was truncated. Again, the reason for what has changed, nothing has changed. It's just having the ability to have the flexibility to add appropriate aspects of a business. So I've done, in the last 6 years, we've designed 3 large RV parks, mostly in urban areas. And the economics of an RV park are very specific. They have a very eclectic clientele. And the small RV parks need certain things, certain amenities that the larger, more urban ones don't have in order for them to be successful. Those amenities would be things that would require an expansion of a conditional use permit and have to go through that process. Not only that, but there are, and it's not just that. It's not saying that, oh, hey, we want to put a Frisbee golf course in and a little RV supply store and a coffee shop and maybe a little restaurant. Those are all kind of maybes. But let's just say the RV park fails. It just doesn't get the clientele that it needs in a business fails. Being able to pivot into a successful business is incredibly important. It's important for our economy. It's important for the local community to provide jobs and to provide economic benefit. And that's really what it is.
So having been a commercial developer for 45 years,
All right.
I would not look at this site as being a commercial site. Why? Topography. You want to speak to that as a civil engineer? You need sight lines. And this particular piece versus the other piece that is a big problem.
Okay.
Therefore, I don't think highest and best use is commercial zoning anyway. Just an opinion, interested in your, I mean, I think you probably have to cut down that hill.
So highest and best use, commercial, and I guess if you look at it from the standpoint of if you're trying to develop it, if you were Walgreens, you would never look at that corner, even if it had even if it had the traffic that Walgreens requires, because you're right, it doesn't have the visibility. That's not the, and maybe that speaks to my earlier point that the natural features of this property are the ones that are going to contract the size and scale of the commercial development that will actually happen there. Is it going to be Walgreens? No, never will. Is it set up for that? No. Is it set up for something that might be a destination restaurant? I mean, one could say Wolf Lodge Inn was never a good location for a restaurant, and yet it was packed every night. There are examples of that all over where little regional niche businesses set up shop in locations that work. And this is one of those locations. I think the owner wants the ability to do that, to provide that, to have that opportunity, to have that business that supports the local community. And does it have to be at a high visibility corner? Not necessarily. But if it's a business that's allowed and by the commercial zoning, it'll be the type that fits there.
In the pictures that were submitted in the application, there was a for sale sign on the property? Yeah?
There was.
I think in one of those pictures it had a for sale sign.
Yeah, it was. It's no longer for sale.
Is it under contract?
No.
Okay, I have no other questions. Vlad?
If I may, and
Yep.
perhaps Mr. Kimball can maybe provide some rebuttal feedback. I'd like to make a point that has not been discussed this evening. The purpose of a conditional use permit and a rezone is to assess surrounding environment and to look at compatibility and impacts. If the zone change is approved, I'd like to kind of provide further clarification what would happen next to the public, because I'm aware that, pretty sure that Mr. Kimball knows this. If a zone change is approved, because both parcels front, meaning they are directly adjacent to a state or federal highway, it would require for the applicants to go through a special notice permit for any commercial development that they would apply for a building permit on. The purpose of a special notice permit is not to look at compatibility and assess the potential conflicts with the surrounding development. It's merely to provide mitigation for those impacts that will be created. It's for that reason, it's an administrative process, which means it's a lesser form of review that Director Callahan would approve. It's not something that would come before you or the Board of County Commissioners. So a special notice permit would not look at compatibility, assess whether or not this is a good or bad use for the site. We would merely look at the scope of proposed use, intensity, and say, regardless of what we think, the decision has already been made that anything goes, and now we have to retroactively say, okay, how do we create minimal impact rather than proactively say, is this really a good idea for the community in the first place to rezone the property for highest best use?
So really two things. One, I think we've made the case tonight that the application that we've submitted meets the criteria to approve the zone change. Meets the legal criteria and the thresholds under both county and state law. With regards to the further process, I think that just adds another layer of security for the public that any development that would happen would require appropriate mitigation would be scrutinized and required by county staff. That's an important thing to remember. It's not a bad thing that it goes through a special notice permit. It's a good thing. It ensures that the proposed uses provide the appropriate mitigation as necessary and provided by code.
Okay. That concludes our hearing this evening on case number ZON 24-0008. Thank you all.